Good evening, ghouls and fiends, and welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror, your weekly one-stop shop for all things spooky and splattertastic. I am your host, Tez. We are live on twitch.tv/Tezius. Now, some regular podcast listeners or YouTube viewers may think, why does the show go out on Twitch? You know, Twitch is normally associated with video games or cam girls. No, I'm not going to become a cam girl, but I am going to do some video gaming tonight. I know this is shocking. One, me actually doing some video game streaming, but two, doing it after a live show. You got a 2-for-1. Don't say I don't treat you guys, or put you through hell. I don't know. It depends really on how you look at it. But yeah, we are live, twitch.tv/Tezius, TEZZIUS. We go out on podcast platforms, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I still probably need to look at other podcast platforms. I just don't, I'm not aware. I don't use any other ones myself. So if there are podcast platforms and you happen to hear this another way, like YouTube, and you think, oh, I'd prefer to listen to this, but I use this app, I can look into it at some point. Maybe, you know. You know what I'm like with getting things done. It doesn't. It may happen, but it'll just take a while. In terms of updates and general kind of chit chat, I did go to the cinema. I actually had a moment here where I thought, oh, I've got a couple of films for review. I've got my little, poster artworks ready and my notes and wiki links. But I went to the cinema on Monday. Oh my god, why haven't I, made notes of that film? And I actually drew a blank for a second. What did I go and watch? Because whenever I go to the cinema, 9 times out of 10, up until very recently, it's been to watch a horror film. Now, the other week I went to see Twisters, which we didn't review because it's not a horror film, but I had a great time. I'm probably going to speak to my fiance when I remember for next weekend, because Trap comes out, which we'll talk about on the new films when we get to the news. And I think we both like the look of that. So fingers crossed we'll be reviewing that next week. But which will bring us back to me having horror cinema visits. But no, I went to watch, as Fran in the chat says, Deadpool 3. Wolverine and Deadpool and Wolverine. Whichever way you look at it. So, I really enjoyed Deadpool 1 and 2. I haven't watched them for a little while, but I really enjoyed them when they came out. I had a great time watching both those films in the cinema. Ryan Reynolds can be incredibly funny. He can be a bit much. So it is very much, I understand that he can be Marmite for people. But I do generally enjoy him, but I think more often than not, give me Ryan Reynolds in small doses. I watch Welcome to Wrexham on and off, and just having the little pepperings of his humour here and there, fine. Sometimes it can be a bit much, but anyway, I really enjoyed the first 2 Deadpool films, and the reviews coming in for Deadpool 3 were a bit like, oh god, oh this is shocking and blah blah blah, and I kind of thought, I wonder what these publications gave the first 2 Deadpool films. Because it's not going for highbrow. It's not going for a really in-depth, intricate, layered story. Because the first 2 films, they had decent stories, but it was the humor and it was the heart. It wasn't all about, just an incredible depth. It just wasn't, and that's not a negative. I had a great time with those. So I went and watched that Monday afternoon, really. Basically, straight after I finished work, I booked a ticket and gunned it down to the cinema. And I had a great time. I think if I was to give it a review score on here, I'd probably give it a straight 8 out of 10. There's tons of cameos. If you've got social media at this point, you probably have had a good majority of them ruined. And that kind of sucks because I enjoyed the people that appeared and didn't know that they were going to be in it. And certainly some of them were really, really, really cool and surprising and good nods to, things that could have happened, but for whatever reason didn't happen. And that's vague enough that I'm hopefully, I'm not giving too much away. But yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine, I should say, Really enjoyed it. I think it was great. So if I was going to give it a review, but this isn't an official Ministry of Horror review, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Like gaming wise, I kind of said to myself that I want to get a game this month because I haven't bought a game for the last couple of months, and I'm just sort of kind of stagnating a bit with games. I'm dipping in and out of Ghost of Tsushima on PS5 again, but I've kind of wanted to play something more on my Xbox just because it's up here. It's in my little Ministry of Horror cave. And I did see that Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was on offer. Now that didn't get great reviews when it came out. It didn't, because of various reasons. Live service action game or whatever, live service game I think is the term, which Gotham Knights was a live service game, and I did find I did find that I enjoyed that to begin with, but got so bored so quickly. Like, I think I've barely scratched the surface on that game, and I've just had no desire to go back to it, which sucks because I love the original Arkham trilogy of games. But anyway, the game has been on offer. It's now not on offer anymore, but it was on offer for £17 for the base game on Amazon, or £20, if you're getting the digital copy. And eventually I thought, okay, well let's just look at a trailer, a gameplay trailer, because I've only ever seen the initial things that circulate online. I haven't actually seen any in-game footage. And within 2 seconds of seeing the in-game footage, I knew that wasn't my sort of game. It looked very kind of platformery and just not for me. So save my money there. And yeah, I tend to, whenever I look for a new game to get, I just look at the deals first, because buying a new game, like a new release game, is just really, they're far too expensive. Unless it's a game that I'm really looking forward to, and I think I have to get that when that comes out, then okay. As long as it's not stupidly expensive, then I can justify it to myself. But if it's like a game that I'm like, okay, I kind of like the look of that, I'll give it a go, it has to be on a good deal. It has to have had a nice discount, because otherwise it's like I'm taking a gamble on whether I'm going to enjoy this or not. And that gamble's taken a chunk out of my, monthly kind of spending budget. I'm an accountant, I budget everything. So, yeah. It's long story short, I haven't done much gaming, but we will do some gaming this evening. And I realise that on this screen, I'm potentially giving away what we're going to be playing and discussing later on, because I managed to overwrite the background, which, oh my god, what have I just overwritten? Okay, oh good lord, right, okay, let me just go back to that, and then let me go down to that one, and then let me go to browse, and let me go, there we go. I did not even twig for the longest time that I had my kind of, let's say, featured presentation background, which means when we get to the featured presentation, we're going to have to mess that around. Anyway, if you're listening to this on podcast, this means nothing to you, but I have picked up a game, a cheap game, because I had an idea of what I want to do a featured presentation on. Long and short of it, long-time listeners, the origins of the Ministry of Horror were a weekly featured presentation, a discussion on either a director's work, a film series, a particular film. I think I did a whole episode on House of the Devil, so I love that film. Particular franchises and so on and so forth. Timelines, all that kind of stuff. But the problem with that was, as the first year went on, it just became like, oh man, it's Ministry of Horror time, and I don't know what I'm going to talk about, and I'm just, getting stressed. And you shouldn't be getting stressed about something that's, essentially a hobby, something that's meant to be enjoyment. And I've always told myself, if you're not getting enjoyment out of the things that you do for fun, then why are you doing them? So that's why we had the little hiatus for a month at the start of 23, I guess it was. But then we went to the alternate weeks, and that was good. And then I've kind of found a nice groove for myself of doing every week, but just not live every week, alternate weekend. The focus of that, though, was to do a retro horror review on the podcast only, well, the non-live show, and then a featured presentation on the live show. But I have found that, the last one we did was the anime show, and prior to that, there'd been a few gaps of doing a featured presentation. So I thought, you know what, I can't keep just not doing my duty on the live show. So the long ramble, the reason that I mentioned the background being a bit different earlier on, the reason I mentioned we're going to do a game later on, there is a horror series that for whatever reason I've never really touched on other than the odd news tidbit here and there. And it's a series that had an impact on me quite early on, but compared to other video game horror series, the other notable one I should say, I never followed it on past the early entries. So, we are going to talk Silent Hill today. That is our featured presentation. We are going to focus on the first 2 games, but also the first 2 films. Now, the reason I'm not going to be discussing the whole series like I did with Resident Evil, and when I say whole series, focused on the mainline games. I didn't really talk on all of the various spin-offs and the Stars Ops games. I haven't played them, and that's similar with Silent Hill. I've played the first 2 games, but for whatever reason I dropped off after that. The third one came and went, and I didn't really notice it, and then there's been various sequels to reducing acclaim over the years. And so I kind of thought, I don't have to talk about the whole series. Why talk about things that I've got no experience of? That would just be me reading a blurb, and I kind of do that already anyway. So we're going to talk about Silent Hill 1, Silent Hill 2, then also the first 2 films. Later this year there is a Silent Hill 2 remake coming out, which has mixed levels of anticipation. Some of it looks like it could be pretty good, but I think the development team behind it have a lot of people nervous. Why that is, I don't know. I don't know what other games they produced, but I'm sure that they don't have a good track record of people nervous. But we are also getting a sequel to Silent Hill. We did have a sequel to Silent Hill called Silent Hill Revelations. We'll talk about that later on. But I figured now's about time to talk Silent Hill. And the game we're going to be playing is the game that I never played, Silent Hill 3. Quickly installed it before going live for the show, so I put a message in the Discord saying things are going to be cutting it fine, and I was a few minutes late going live, but I have got installed on the PlayStation and did a quick test of Silent Hill 3. I don't know how long we're going to play for tonight because it is tank controls. And when I tried to do Resident Evil Code Veronica about a year or so ago, that didn't last long because I'd completely forgotten how difficult tank controls are when you're used to modern controls. I'm going to have a quick look when we get to the game time to see if there's anything in the options, but it's certainly, this HD release isn't a remaster. It basically does very much feel like this is that game, just not with scan lines all over it. It is very grainy still, but yeah. So I think it's going to be, maybe we'll play for an hour or so. Depends on how long I can mentally withstand tank controls. But anyway, we've had a long old ramble. We've had a long old catch up. We've got a shite ton of news to talk about. We have got 2 horror films to review later on as well. Those films are Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, the first one, and potentially the only one of that series I will watch. Thank you, Fran, for pointing out that it was available for free on Tubi. Very, very thankful for that. And then the other is a brand new sequel that's just come out on streaming and I guess just in general release. And that's the sequel to the film we reviewed last week. We're going to be reviewing Horror in the High Desert 3, Firewatch. I didn't even realise that had come out yet, but I went on earlier in this week onto the Amazon store, looked at the new films and saw it there, and I thought, okay, similar price to Horror in the High Desert 2. Let's continue and see where it's going this time. So you're going to hear my thoughts on that, and then we'll get to Silent Hill. Anyway, here's the bit everyone loves. It's time for the horror news. This is the news. Ho, 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 ho.
This is God.
A quick swig of beer, that's right. We're going old school. I'm drinking a beer during the show. Probably a bad idea. I'll no doubt burp a ton. I think that's why I stopped having a beer or a fizzy pop, like a Diet Coke during the show, because I just end up burping into the microphone the whole time, and who wants to hear that? Let's be honest. We do have Fran and Eddie in the chat. Sorry, guys, I haven't really been paying attention. So, talking earlier on, we mentioned obviously Deadpool. Fran says, I've seen a clip of a cameo, and I'll just say, in case people don't know who the cameo is and whatnot, of a character they enjoy. Looks awesome. Need to get to the cinema. I know who you're referring to, and yeah, I'd completely forgotten about the previous developmental hell, and that doesn't narrow it down too much because a ton of films have just generally languished in developmental hell. But yeah, very cool moments. Eddie, my laptop's playing around, so I may have to go off if it gets too annoying. Yeah, I understand tech drama very much so. So if you need to go off, then that's completely cool. Fran, isn't there currently a weird weekly Silent Hill interactive show? Now, I remember a while ago, Konami, rather than just announce, hey, we have a new Silent Hill game coming out, it was, okay, there's a Silent Hill 2 remake, and then there's about 4 other brand new games, then there's an interactive weekly TV show, then there's a new film. It was like a Silent Hill... I was going to use an incredibly vulgar term, but it was like a Silent Hill bonanza. But yeah, I haven't seen this interactive show. I don't know if it's meant to be good or not. I mean, with Silent Hill, who knows? It certainly doesn't seem to have the level of prestige in the modern era than it has done in its first couple of entries. But, I don't know. I won't pass judgment. And Eddie's got to change around on my phone. July was a tough month that brought out the heel in me, Fran says. I completely get that, If things are tough, sometimes you just want to kick back and light a fire and see what happens. It's fine. So anyway, let's jump into the horror news. As per usual, all the horror news comes from bloodydisgusting.com. This one is a write-up from John Squires. It's the 8 new horror movies releasing this week. Now, apologies if you can hear dogs barking, or hopefully you can't hear, but I do have a fan on. It's incredibly warm this week, and last time I did the show, I didn't have a fan on. I think I had to close my windows because of dogs barking outside, and I melted. Pretty much melted. I'm surprised I'm still alive. So, hopefully the fan isn't causing any interference. If it is, please do let me know in the chat. I'll turn that off, but the windows are having to stay open. It is what it is. It's a roasting one. So horror returns to the box office with the release of M. Night Shyamalan's latest movie this week, and it's being joined by 7 other movies in theatres and streaming at home. So director Michael Sarnowski's A Quiet Place Day 1 has just passed $250 million at the worldwide box office, and the prequel movie is now available on digital at home. Experience the day the world went quiet in the blockbuster hit A Quiet Place Day 1, arriving to buy or rent on digital from July 30th from Paramount Home Entertainment. There's also a 3-movie collection including A Quiet Place, Quiet Place Part 2, I should say, and A Quiet Place Day 1, also available to purchase digitally from July 30th. So the little blurb about it: when Samira returns home to New York City, her simple trip turns into a harrowing nightmare when mysterious creatures that hunt by sound attack. Accompanied by her cat Frodo and an unexpected ally played by Joseph Quinn, Samira, played by Lupita Nyong'o, must embark on a perilous journey through the city that's suddenly gone silent, where the only rule is to stay quiet to stay alive. Djimon Hounsou and Alex Wolff also star in this intensely suspenseful thriller. So I have heard that it's good. I haven't heard anything bad about A Quiet Place Day 1. I'd sort of toyed with the idea of maybe going to see it in the cinema this week. I think it is... I think it is still available. I'll see how our week sort of pans out in terms of busyness, and maybe we'll pop down and see it. Um, just because, like with cinema discounts, it's a cheap night out, really, and I love the cinema when there's not people talking. Which there were moments where people were having full-on conversations in Deadpool Wolverine, and it didn't last too long, but it was just like, you're not the only people in here, so shut up. Um, but yeah, maybe go and see it, because it is the sort of film where it is quite a tense experience in the cinema, because you get sucked in and you don't want to make a sound. I mean, I eat popcorn throughout films, although popcorns are, people think that popcorn's healthy. It really isn't. It's like sweet popcorn, especially, which is my favorite, is incredibly bad. But you almost don't want to eat your popcorn or crunch or anything like that. But as I say previously, I really enjoyed the first film. The second film, I probably need to give it a rewatch. I just felt a bit like, fine. Didn't add much new, We'll see. Anyway, next up. From the writer of Shark Side of the Moon comes the Asylum's Shark Warning, which first swam to limited theatres on July 26th before arriving on VOD outlets July 30th. In Shark Warning, after 20 years, a man returns to the town where his brother was killed by a shark, but when it resurfaces and kills again, the man decides to hunt down the predator. Of course, the storyline is set into motion when a bunch of pesky humans commit the cardinal sin of shark attack movies, putting their own greed ahead of the safety of the town's residents. Yup, it's another low-budget Jaws. You already know what you're getting from this one. Excuse me. David Chakouchi, Andrew J. Caters, and Angela Cole star. Yeah, I think we've mentioned this one or another sort of Asylum release on a previous show. I think if you go into it knowing what it's going to be like, then just see how you get on. Yeah. So looking in the chat, Francis enjoyed Quiet Place 1. Quiet Place 2 was fine, but I'm not excited for a prequel. Do we need to see how the aliens arrive? And I think that's kind of, I mean, with prequels normally I'm rarely that interested in a prequel. I like a good example, I suppose, would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre prequel. So it was the prequel to the remake. Because to me, it's like I could get the background. It's not even a case of that film doesn't even sort of focus on like the upbringing of Leatherface. I mean, we had that in the film Leatherface, which is terrible. Another example of a terrible prequel. But that was just more of a precursor to the events of the first film in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But to me, it was like I kind of know that the protagonists are all going to die. Because if they're not all going to die, then surely they would have got help and had the Sawyer family or whatever family they called themselves in that version arrested prior to the events of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But that isn't what happened. The antagonists that are in the prequel are in the original, or the remake of the original, so therefore the protagonist that you should be rooting for, it's kind of pointless because they're all going to die. Now, for something like, and this will probably rage some people, for something like Star Wars, which I'm not a Star Wars big fan, I appreciate them, I can understand the appeal in doing prequels there, just because Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, is quite a nuanced character. He is full-on villain when he's introduced in the first released film, A New Hope, who then goes eventually on a redemption arc as we find out bits and bobs about his backstory. But, there's enough there where you can go, okay, so he previously was a Jedi. What happened to make him suddenly become this evil person? What happened to Obi-Wan? Like, how much involvement did he have? And all that stuff. I get that. I get the appeal there with going, okay, let's go back. But if you were to say do a prequel to Halloween, which obviously opens with young Michael Myers killing his sister, I don't want to watch a film of like basically a Michael Myers version of The Good Son, where it's like, okay, well, this kid is either flips on a dime and becomes a killer, or there's all these warning signs that everyone ignores. It's just like, what's the point? So, and I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, in the second film, we saw the moment when they landed. We saw it from the perspective of our protagonists in the first film. So we saw that aliens came down from the sky, very quickly started taking over by murdering anyone that made a sound. Okay, gotcha. And that's kind of it. Whereas this appears to be, from what I understand, a film of the day that the aliens came down from other people's perspectives. Now, one of the characters does feature in part 2, but he's not a main character. His co-star is a big name, but yeah, it's a long bit of a ramble of why I'm never been that interested in prequels. But I feel if it's something where a good story can be told, maybe. And the feedback seems to be that it's a good film. It's done very well at the box office, but yeah. If we get down to the cinema this week to watch it, that'd be cool. But I'm more than happy to wait for it to be on streaming. I'm not that fussed. Anyway, next up, Escape Room meets Cube in Lionsgate's new horror movie, The Abandon, which first arrived in select theatres on July 19th. The film is now available on VOD outlets. Jonathan Rosenthal, Tamara Perry, and Regis Terenicio star. In the film, injured US soldier Miles Willis awakens after witnessing a blinding white light from a battlefield in Iraq to discover he is trapped in a mysterious cube armed only with his combat gear. His dire situation escalates as the cube begins to change with violent shifts in gravity and the appearance of cryptic writings on the walls. As Miles begins to question his sanity, he finds a lifeline, a voice on the other end of his satellite phone who claims to be a prisoner in a similar space. As the walls close in, these two strangers must put their heads together if they are to outwit their captors and unlock this deadly puzzle. So, the setup of that sounds pretty interesting. Cube is a pretty good film. The setup is interesting, but it's one of those films where I just found I didn't really like a lot of the characters. So when they're in peril or fighting to survive, it didn't have that much impact on me. I think the setup of it was really, really good. There were some great set pieces in Cube, and I haven't seen any of the sequels, so I don't know if they ever sort of talked about the wider world. I think one of the characters does escape at the end of that. I'm not entirely sure. But that as a setup is pretty interesting. An escape room. I've seen the two main escape room films. I think there's another film called Escape Room that came out at the same time, so it's a bit confusing, but they're pretty decent. I mean, the first film's the better one of the two, but the artwork on the trailer link for YouTube looks incredibly shonky sci-fi. Hopefully that's just really bad artwork. But as a setup, I don't mind it. I don't mind it. It sounds like it could be pretty interesting. I'm in the chat. So Fran says, enjoyed Quiet Place World. Oh yeah, we mentioned that. Fran also said, David Chokesy, or however it's spelled, sounds familiar. Was he in Baywatch? Let's do a quick... Can I not just double click on his name and select the text? God, bloody disgusting. Oh, okay, now the page is freaking out. Okay, I'm not going to click on that. So, moving on. The South Korean horror anthology featuring the works of Won Kyung-choi, Byung Deok-jeon, Jin Sam, Jang Mi Kim, Gwon Ji Lee, and Wally Seo. The Screenbox exclusive Body Parts is now streaming on Screenbox and also available on VOD outlets. In the film, Si Kyung, the youngest reporter, infiltrates an unnamed religious group. Invited to a special ceremony, she witnesses strange things happening in the prayer house. 5 sacrifices and 5 stories are offered by the people who desperately wait to be heard by their god. When the story is over, she too must make a sacrifice. So we don't have Screenbox in the UK, so I guess I will just have to keep an eye out for when this lands on Prime or... I mean, I would say Netflix, but... I was looking for horror films to watch earlier on after I finished work, and I couldn't see anything that grabbed my attention on Prime. Certainly not anything I wanted to spend money on to rent. Checked Paramount Plus, Sky, the usual suspects. Nothing new seemed to show up on Shudder on Prime. Anyway, I ended up going onto Netflix, and it just sucks because Netflix used to be my app, like my kind of go-to app, and now it's like, at least from horror perspective anyway, it's terrible. It is terrible. So Body Parts sounds like it could be kind of cool. I don't really know too much about it. So don't need to talk about that. We don't have to talk about that. So next, a group of young friends staying at an Airbnb and picked off one by one by a killer whose elaborate murder set pieces are inspired by the 7 deadly sins in our latest production, #AMFAD, All My Friends Are Dead, which comes to select theatres and VOD August 2nd, today. The slasher comes from Saw 4 to 3D writer and the collector director Marcus Dunstan. In the horror thriller, I'll just say All My Friends Are Dead, a group of college friends rent an Airbnb for the biggest music festival of the year. A weekend of partying quickly takes a turn as the group is murdered one by one, according to their sin. Jade Pettyjohn, Jennifer Enns, Ali Fumiko Whitney, Michaela Russell, Julian Haig, Justin Derrickson, Cardi Wong, and Jack Dove Smith star with singer. I'm going to put singer in quotation marks. Singer Jojo Siwa. I only know Jojo Siwa because she keeps appearing on Instagram Reels doing ridiculous dancing, and just seeming like there's got to be some drugs involved, or I don't know, just seeming like Disney unhinged. Is all I can say like that. Fran in the chat says, "Is Jojo the monster?" I mean, that's the only role that would make sense. The artwork for this, or the screen grab, I should say, is showing like a killer holding like a hatchet or a crucifix, maybe. It's either a hatchet or a crucifix, with one of these sort of digital masks on, and that is quite a cool look because obviously it can change throughout the film. It does instantly make me think of series 3, I want to say, of Slasher, which that was or is on Netflix, because the killer in that has one of those sorts of masks and it is pretty good. And the Slasher series are pretty good. Every season is like a solid 7 out of 10. It's not amazing. Characters aren't always that good, but on the whole, you're going to get a decent horror with some very good kills. And yeah, Marcus Dunstan, so the collector director. Now, I don't know if it features in the news from what I've selected, but it's finally been confirmed. We will be getting a third collector film. There were legal issues that had been holding it up and whatnot, but Marcus Dunstan, and I believe the star, the guy who plays Will in Criminal Minds, have confirmed that we will be getting a third The Collector film, which is very exciting news. And speaking of Criminal Minds, we've obviously previously done a show on Criminal Minds. It's one of my favorite TV series. For anyone who's been watching the latest season of Criminal Minds Evolution, so it's like the second series of that new kind of series, I'd be interested to know your thoughts, because I haven't been enjoying it that much. And I've never felt like that with the Criminal Minds series. I don't know if I think it's because of the format of doing this, focusing on one case throughout the show. And the reason I think that is because whilst I really enjoyed the first season of Evolution, with this one, I think the character of Voight was so menacing and is now a bit of like I'm the smarmy wisecracker, and I'm sort of part of the group in places. I'm not really a fan of that. The antagonists in the series, I'm not really a fan of them, and I think I'm pretty close to the end. But yeah, and there was also some moments with some of the characters acting all sort of like zany and whatnot, and it's just, I don't know, it hasn't quite hit it for me. So all I can hope is that we get Reed back for a next season, just to kind of bring some of the classic sauce back. But yeah, if people watch the latest series of Criminal Minds, let me know in the Discord or on X your thoughts, because it's just not quite hitting with me this season. And funnily enough, the episodes that I have enjoyed the most or thought really unique the most are the kind of almost monster of the week episodes, the classic Criminal Minds episodes. There's one with a person who is taking people and essentially melting them in a vat of acid. Sounds horrible. It is very horrible, but that was a really powerful episode. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of this format. It worked in the last series, and this one, I don't know, it's not quite working for me, unfortunately. But anyway, a new collector film coming. And then finally, take your seats. The show's about to begin. M. Night Shyamalan's Trap, the filmmaker's 16th movie, comes to theatres from Warner Brothers this Friday, August 2nd. Salika Shyamalan stars in the new thriller as fictional pop star Lady Raven. In the upcoming thriller, also starring Josh Hartnett, a father and teen daughter attend a pop concert where they realise they're at the centre of a dark and sinister event. Hartnett had recently described the mysterious film as very bizarre and very dark. The cast also includes Hayley Mills, Marnie McPhail, Vanessa Smythe, Salika Shyamalan, Scott Ian McDougall, Christy Woods, and Callie Lorella. Yeah, I do like the look of this. I initially had thought when the trailer first dropped for this that, they're kind of revealing a twist straight off the bat. Like, surely you'd want that to be a surprise, but actually, the more that I've seen the trailers, I do get that is the hook for the film. That's not a twist. And I think it's because you see M. Night Shyamalan and you expect, it's obviously going to be a twist. But it's because that twist on the narrative is coming at the very start of the film or very early on, and that's the whole hook. I get it now. So that complaint that I initially had, whilst minor, is kind of doesn't matter. It's not a sticking point. So I'm pretty hyped for Trap. I've realised I've been banging on for ages. Let's move on. For some reason, Blood Disgusting site is going all funny. I'm going to trim down some of these news things because I did initially fill up the news, and we've discussed quite a few of those bits. So this is pretty interesting. Megan Navarro write-up. Shudder announces Joe Bob Briggs' The Last Drive-In Night Marathon event this month. Horror host Joe Bob Briggs is back in action. Shudder has announced an all-new special, The Last Drive-In Night Marathon, celebrating the conclusion of The Last Drive-In's supersized 6th season, which debuted earlier this year. The special premieres Friday, August 30th on Shudder TV and AMC Plus TV feeds, and will be available on demand on both platforms the following Sunday, September 1st. Host Joe Bob Briggs and trusty right hand Darcy the Mail Girl bring a few surprise guests to stay up all night to party like jungle animals for the Last Drive-In Night Marathon, a dusk till dawn marathon event celebrating 6 years and 6 seasons with 6 killer movies, just like the devil intended. I think I would struggle to do an all-nighter of 6 horror films. Like, if I was doing horror films throughout the day, great. I'm not a night owl like I was back in the day, so I think I'd really struggle. As usual, don't expect to know what the marathon lineup entails, but you can follow the horror host on socials for hints leading up to the event on August 30th. On Last Drive-In, Briggs, a world's foremost drive-in movie critic, hosts eclectic horror movies, talking about their merits, histories, and significances to genre cinema. Fans can watch new episodes of Season 6 every other Friday on Shudder and AMC+. The Last Drive-In Night Marathon will cap off Season 6 in a way only the Last Drive-In crew knows how, with a special 6-movie marathon. The Mutant family will be happy to know that Briggs plans to continue hosting and writing about movies for as long as he's able to. Yeah. I mean, this sounds so cool, but we just don't get it in the UK, and it sucks so bad. Like, there was a period where we had 3 seasons and a few specials of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. And they were really good because not only do you get some insight and some history in the film, peppered throughout the film, but also you got to see some great films and there's some great interviews as well with members of the cast and crew. But I understand it's most likely a rights issue and that rights for films change from service to service every few months, really, or sometimes weeks, and so that makes it then difficult. But I think the last time I looked, there was maybe 2 episodes in total across the 5 seasons that were available. And it's not even like you can purchase them in the UK. It was just not available, not available. Here's 1 episode that's available, and it's the episodes that are available of the films that are already available on Shudder. So, I understand it, but it just sucks because I did used to really enjoy a Joe Bob Briggs episode every once in a while. One day maybe I'll look into like a VPN, but I tried that not long ago and I couldn't really get my head around it. I probably should have just spent 5 minutes Googling, but yeah. So you guys in the US and Canada, look forward to Joe Bob Briggs Marathon. I'm jealous. Yeah, don't need to talk about that. It looks crap. Maxine is now available to watch at home, Megan Navarro writes. Ty West and Mia Goth complete their decade-hopping horror trilogy with A24's Maxine, a sequel to both X and Pearl, and it's now available to watch at home. The closer in West's trilogy is now available on digital. So the synopsis from A24: in 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress Maxine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. Mia Goth stars in the 1980s set Maxine alongside an incredible ensemble featuring Elizabeth Debicki, Moses Sumney, Michelle Monaghan, Bobby Cannavale, Halsey, Lily Collins, Giancarlo Esposito, Sophie Thatcher, and Kevin Bacon. So the film debuted with an impressive 7.8 million over its opening weekend. I don't know what it finished with, but yeah. I mean, I know that these aren't huge budget films, and I've really enjoyed them, so I will be keeping an eye out. I still need to pick up Pearl. Actually, I've only got I've got X on Blu-ray. I guess what I'll probably do is just wait for them to do a collection, hopefully a 4K collection. Because so far, I think Pearl and X are just on standard Blu-ray, and I don't often bump up for a 4K release unless it's something special. And I do enjoy the Ty West films, so I'll be keeping an eye out for that. But yeah, if you haven't seen Maxine, I'd definitely give it a go. It's a real good love letter to 80s slashers and giallos. Next up, still got quite a bit of news to go through. Until Dawn movie cast adds Peter Stormare and more. Supermassive's hit game, this is from John Squires, I should say, Until Dawn, is headed to the big screen with a horror movie adaptation from director David F. Sandberg, who did Lights Out, Annabelle Creation, and Shazam. And The Hollywood Reporter brings us the latest casting news this week. For starters, Peter Stormare will be reprising his role from the Until Dawn video game. THR notes, insiders say that in a callback to the game, Stormare is reprising his role of therapist Dr. Hill. Additionally, Maya Mitchell and Belmont Kamali have signed on. Ella Rubin, Michael Cimino, Ji Young Yu, and Odessa Azion will star in the upcoming horror film. Blair Butler wrote the original draft, and Gary Doberman is now working on the script. The film is set to be an R-rated love letter to the horror genre. Until Dawn centers around a group of 8 teenagers who decide to vacation for a night in a cabin on the fictional Blackwood Mountain, exactly 1 year after the disappearance of 2 girls, the twin sisters of a member of their group. Shortly after arriving, the gang find themselves under attack by a psychopath and must attempt to survive until sunrise. Throughout the adventure, players alternate between all 8 characters, making critical decisions as the story advances, which drastically affects the game's outcome, leading to hundreds of different scenarios. So, whatever story we get in the film, I'm not too sure, which makes me very nervous for the film, because the whole kind of setup for the game is your decisions affect how the game progresses and who lives and who dies. So I don't know. I don't understand how that's going to translate quite as well into the film. So notice the camera's looking a bit dark. Yeah, that helps. Not too sure. Not too sure. The success of Until Dawn led Supermassive Games to create the Dark Pictures Anthology, an anthology series of horror video games with a similar interactive approach. Supermassive was also behind the slasher video game The Quarry. Yeah, so I enjoy all of the games. The one that I still haven't ever gotten around to finishing, which I do have on my Xbox actually, so maybe I should start a fresh game with that and stream that. That's an idea. Was Little Hope. I did find that one was a bit bare bones when it came to the story. But like The Devil in Me and the one set in the pyramid, they were all pretty good. I enjoyed them for the most part. So, and The Quarry was really good fun. We streamed that whole game actually on here, and I had a great time with that. Fran, could they film a couple of versions and not mention that until it's in cinemas? People realising they've seen different things would increase interest. I mean, I guess that's interesting. What they could do is have a few different versions, release them into the cinemas, and then when the game comes out on home media or digital, do like a Bandersnatch thing, interactive film. So then if you had it on home media, you've got like, well, here's the theatrical release or a different version. I mean, home media releases are very bare bones these days, so I'm looking for a bit too much here. But then also have the interactive version where you can select different routes for the story to go. I think that could be kind of interesting, I guess. Oh, well, just looking at the chat here. So Eddie says I'm nailing some of these names. Well, I try. Fran says we need an Asian horror episode. I mean, yeah, I don't know why I haven't done that yet. I think I would have to earmark some for fresh watches and some, to talk about. I mean, we've done a review of The Grudge. I think we've also done a review of The Ring because I have got. Well, I had The Grudge. I sold it, but I have the Ring box set. But there's like A Tale of Two Sisters. I keep meaning to get around to watch. I definitely need to restart Pulse and actually pay attention to that. I'd also try to watch some more modern Asian horror. But yeah, we need to do an Asian horror episode. So maybe in the next few live episodes, I will earmark a few films to watch and discuss that. And yes, you can all chortle at me butchering the pronunciations of the names. So, is there anything else to discuss on news, or can we just skip ahead? I think we can probably just... Oh, okay. Well, speaking of Asian horror, the last bit of news is Mega Navarro write-up. Fangoria Studios teams with Junji Ito on 3 live-action feature film adaptations. Last year brought news that Fangoria Studios was teaming up with legendary horror mangaka... I've never heard that term before. Junji Ito on a live-action adaptation of Blood-Sucking Darkness, along with 2 additional live-action feature films. A new report from Screen Daily reveals what those mysterious projects are. It was previously teased that Blood-Sucking Darkness was set to be the first of 3 projects that Fangoria plans to adapt from Ito's hit vampire series, Smashed, Junji Ito Story Collection. Now, Pan-Asian studio Through the Lens Entertainment has teamed up with Fangoria Studios to produce Blood-Sucking Darkness, The Mystery of the Haunted House Part 1, and The Mystery of the Haunted House Part 2. In the Junji Ito stories, Blood-Sucking Darkness follows a girl with an eating disorder who vomits blood and is stalked by vampire bats, while The Mystery of the Haunted House revolves around 2 friends who must escape a ghostly home and its demented proprietor. The tales originate from the Smashed Junji Ito Story Collection. What's intriguing about the news is that The Mystery of the Haunted House features a recurring antagonist in Junji Ito's work, Soichi Tsuji. Could this be the start of the Junji Ito live-action cinematic universe? Not everything has to be a fucking universe. All 3 adaptations are set to go into development this summer, with production targeting 2025 and 2026. Ito will serve as producer alongside Armin Ajanian, Tara Ansley, and Abby Joel of Fangoria Studios, Yasu Kutami and Tsubatsu Yamaguchi of Amuse Group USA, and Aditya Chand and Jay Voy Hyoi of TTLE. Indie producer I don't care. While these adaptations are still years away from release, we have Adult Swim's miniseries Uzumaki, based on the supernatural horror manga, on the way very soon. Written and illustrated by Ito, the original manga series told the story of the citizens of Kurazu-cho, a fictional city that's plagued by a supernatural curse involving spirals. Look for that to arrive in September. So, I have watched the Netflix Junji Ito series, and I thought on the whole that was pretty good. I think some purists weren't really that pleased with elements of it. I've only read Uzumaki, which is pretty good. I did find myself kind of getting like wondering where it was going. And if there was going to be any sort of... So there's no happy ending, but I guess you don't always get that in horror, and more often than not you don't anyway. But I did find myself getting a bit like, this is dragging out. But in terms of art style, it's incredibly creepy. Like, Junji Ito is kind of synonymous with just terrifying visuals. Like, he kind of just knows how to make appearances look horrifying. So this does sound interesting. I don't know how it will translate to live action. I know there has been a Uzumaki film, I think that's on Prime or Shudder, that didn't get reviewed that well, so I haven't got around to watching it. But okay, I mean, yeah, that seems pretty exciting. I'll definitely be looking out for the Adult Swim series of Uzumaki, just because I've read it, so I have a bit of a source reference. Yeah, okay. There's more popping off in the chat. We won't go there. So that is it, finally, for the horror news, and I can finally get a swig of drinks because I'm getting a bit hoarse. That was the news. Lovely stuff. So, on to the first film to review. So, we've featured on the news quite a bit in the last year, I suppose, about this phenomenon, or this new craze of kids' favourite characters who have now entered the public domain, and so therefore can be used for the purposes of anything. You know, it's free reign. And as such, our favourite genre has adapted that. And I do understand that, you know, oh, here's a character that we've grown up knowing as a lovable scamp, and now they're going around murdering people. Oh, that's quite a juxtaposition. How unique. I get that. I do understand that. Clowns, for example. Clowns were originally meant to be these caricatures who just do funny faces and fall over, and you see them at the circus and whatnot. And then, you know, there's been a few horror instances, most notably Stephen King with It. And Stephen King had a comment on an interview, and someone said, "How did you think up Pennywise?" And he kind of said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember it exactly, but part of it always stood out to me of, a clown in a circus looks completely normal. A clown knocking on your door at midnight is terrifying. And okay, get that. But when this got announced, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, I think it was because the announcement came with an image of Pooh and I think Piglet as well, approaching a girl in a hot tub. And they just looked terrible in that image. It just, like, I was initially confused as to, is the story people wearing Pooh and Piglet masks? Because it does just look like cheap store-bought masks with men wearing them. And obviously, in terms of movie magic, yes, that is what's happening. Actors are wearing prosthetics, I should say. But it doesn't look like that it doesn't look like it's anything close to real. Like, and that's possible when it's an 80s film, low budget, and this is a modern film with a low budget. But it instantly says to me, cheap cash grab. And so for that reason, I was never that interested in watching it. Second film has come out. It's had, slightly better reviews. But I'd kind of always said I've got no interest in watching this, until it's available for free. I don't really want to spend money on watching it. And then Fran mentioned last week that this is now available on Tubi, and Tubi's available in the UK. So I thought, okay, I am a man of my word. I will watch it because I don't have a valid excuse not to now. Apologies if you can hear my dogs barking. I don't know what's going on. Never know what's going on. We'll have a quick look at the chat before we kind of get into this. So Eddie says they really do want to ruin kids' childhoods, but this is not too bad for film. Strongly disagree. I agree with the first part, Eddie. Strongly disagree with the second part, and we'll get to that. Fran, kids these days don't watch Winnie the Pooh or Bambi, so this won't ruin their childhoods. TikTok, YouTube, and Skibbity Toilet will... I still don't know what Skibbity Toilet is. I keep seeing, like Reels or TikToks, whatever, where it says Gen Z trying to talk to Gen X or millennials, and it's all Skibbity Toilet Ohio and drill, Riz, blah blah blah. And yeah, I'm sounding super old. I don't care. It just sounds ridiculous. I don't understand it. And I guess that, when we were young, there's probably the previous generation would hear slang and think, Jesus Christ, what are you talking about? Skibbity bop bop. I don't know if that's just general nonsense or if people use that like legitimately. It sounds ridiculous, but whatever. I'll hold off on raging about Gen Z talk. I don't know why I'm all worked up today. I've had quite a nice day. Anyway, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is a 2023 British independent slasher film. Produced, directed, written, and edited by Rhys Frake Waterfield, the first installment of the Twisted Childhood universe, the TCU. It serves as a horror retelling of A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard's Winnie the Pooh books, and stars Craig David Dowsett as the titular character, and Chris Cordell as Piglet, with Amber Doig Thorne, Nikolai Leon, Mariah Taylor, Natasha Rose Mills, and Daniel Ronald in supporting roles. It follows Pooh and Piglet, who have become feral murderers as they terrorize a group of young university women, with Christopher Robin when he returns to the 100-acre wood 5 years after leaving for college. So, as per usual, I'm just reading the chat. I don't get it. I don't understand what's going on. Anyway, we'll talk a bit about the plot, and I'm going to use plot with quotation marks, and then I'll say about any highs, all the lows, and what score I give it. Years ago, a young Christopher Robin met and befriended a group of anthropomorphic, I pronounce that right, creatures: owl, rabbit, Eeyore, Piglet, and Winnie the Pooh in the 100-acre wood. After Christopher abandoned them for college to become a doctor, added to the arrival of a winter with no food to eat, the starved creatures cannibalized Eeyore and returned to their feral instincts, whilst also vowing to never speak again. Now that is probably the potential only high point of the film. It has this opening animated kind of short almost, which is pretty good. I'll give credit where it's due. That kind of opening introduction was the high point, singular, of this film. 5 years later, Christopher, now an adult, returns to the 100-acre wood, accompanied by his fiancée Mary, and finds the place deserted. At night, the couple are ambushed by Piglet, who strangles Mary to death with a chain before he and Pooh drag Christopher into the woods. Sometime later, university students Mariah, Jessica, Alice, Zoe, Lara, and Tina rent a cabin in the 100-acre wood, so the latter can move on from a traumatizing stalking experience. Tina, lost in the woods, is attacked by Pooh. She hides in a nearby garage, but Pooh finds and throws her into a wood chipper. Later, back in the treehouse, Pooh whips Christopher with Eeyore's tail and showers him with Mary's blood. Okay, so first things first, the actor who plays Christopher Robin, Nikolai Leon, he is bad. I mean, there isn't much good in this film, but he is quite bad in this film, and I don't know if that's him as an actor. I wouldn't want to pass anything direct because that's probably not fair. But like the script is basically him just going, Pooh, what have you done? I'm sorry, I had to go to college. I didn't mean to abandon you, Pooh. Why? That's literally the dialogue for one of the main characters outside of the opening when he's with his fiancée. As mentioned earlier on, the characters like Pooh and Piglet, it's just really bad masks. The kills themselves aren't terrible. They're not inventive. I mean, they look decent. Like, it's filmed well enough. Some of the set pieces are, a step up from other independent films, just in terms of I've seen much worse in, like set pieces and camera work. Like, they've got decent cameras on this film. That's what I can give as a positive. But yeah, the acting on the whole isn't really very good. And like I say, the kills are bloody and violent, and really quite nasty. It's going for that approach of like the nasty, overt gore. And I don't mind that. It's not my personal favourite. I'm not a huge gore hound, but I think when it's done well, it's done well. I've talked about a few films where, I love the Demons films. I love, to a lesser extent, Terrifier 2. I've talked about that a ton. But yeah, I think the thing here as well is the characterization of the university students. They are so interchangeable. No one stands out. No one seems to have a real direct story other than, let's say, Tina. But throughout the film, I didn't know whose name was what, because it was just like, okay, we've just got a bunch of university students. They're going to get killed off one by one, It's not looking to do anything highbrow. I get that. But it's just... It was as bad as I was expecting, even more so. I appreciate it's got its fans. I mean, Christ, it had a $100,000 budget, $100,000 budget, which obviously $100,000 to you and me is a lot of money, but in terms of film production budgets, that's very, very small. I'd say that's like a step up from micro budget. That's like just a general low budget film. But it made 7.7 million at the box office. Which again, you compare that to blockbusters, that's nothing, that's poor. But you compare it to a $100,000 budget, like that is incredible. That's 700% profit, 707% profit. I think I should know that because I'm an accountant, but yeah. So I got to give the credit where it's due in terms of it's been very successful, and obviously it's got a universe coming. It's got a second film that's out. If the second film lands on a streaming service that I already subscribe to, I will give it a go, but I'm not paying for it because I've really disliked this film. Trying to think what was the film that I really disliked that I reviewed either last week or the week before. I can't remember what that was. I think I gave that like a 2 or a 2.5. Not sure. This I'm giving a 1.5 because the kills are all right. It looks, the camera and some of the locales are all right. The acting's terrible. The masks look dog shit. There was a lot for me to dislike with this, and normally if I've got low expectations of a film, then it's more often than not that I'll be like, oh, you know what, actually, it's okay. Wasn't as bad as I was expecting. But this was just more so. I really disliked it. But if you enjoy it, don't let my review take away from your enjoyment. I just really, really, really didn't like that. 1.5 out of 10 for that piece of shite. Next up, Horror in the High Desert 3, Firewatch. Just looking at the chat quickly. So, Frown the Cannon sounds like a 10 out of 10 is coming. Well, now you know, definitely not. Eddie's second film has updated them and made them look like actual killers. Fran, what's the definition of insanity, Tez? Why do you just make the same mistake again? But I'm a glutton for punishment. And Eddie, oh no, we can't annoy you with it. Joking. If it's on a streaming platform, I will give it a watch, as is my duty as a horror host. So, Horror in the High Desert 3, Firewatch. Now, we reviewed part 2, Minerva, on last week's recorded show. Mentioned then that I really enjoyed the first film. I really enjoyed the documentary focus of the first film. I found with the second film they tried to sort of up the footage, the found footage elements for the scares, but I found that was at the detriment of the documentary. Like, the story just didn't feel quite as engaging that time around. But it ended with a bit of a, and I won't say much about the ending of the actual film. I don't want to give spoilers away, but it had this kind of like little kind of coda moment just before the credits rolled, where a YouTuber or influencer type personality from Mexico, I think, pops up to say, "Hi, I'm heading into the high desert because I know where the building was that Gary Hinge was last seen at, who's the outdoorsman from the first film." And then it ended, credits rolled. And that kind of made me go like, okay, I'm interested to watch the third film. I thought the second film it was good, but it was a step down from the first film. So much to my delight, I saw on Prime Store earlier this week that Horror in the High Desert 3 was available. So I rented it. It's a 2024 horror film, written and directed by Dutch Marich, starring Laurie Felix Bass, Susie Block, and Brooke Bradshaw. So, as with the other reviews, we'll talk about the plot, talk about highs and lows, and I'll give it a score. As a wildfire bears down on the opposite side of the state, Oscar Mendoza, armed with a secret, takes advantage of the distraction and journeys to northeastern Nevada in search of missing outdoorsman Gary Hinch's last known whereabouts. So we don't have a Wikipedia page. We've just got IMDb, which gives us just a very sort of short blurb like that. Okay. Does it reach the heights of the first film? No. But I do think it is a little bit of an improvement on the second film. So the documentary aspect is a focus, again, more so than it was in the second film. It very much did sort of meander in parts just because it's established straight away that Oscar Mendoza has gone missing or went into the high desert and he was found later on. You know that straight away, and it's like, all right, okay, so obviously it just felt like, are we going to be rehashing now the first film? Because I wondered if we'd be following his investigation or his search in real time because of the video at the end of the second film. But no, it's kind of, again, similar, that someone has gone into the high desert and we're following their progress. So that's the same setup as the first film. The second film was more about some cases, similar cases that have occurred of disappearances and murders in that area, and they're a bit mysterious. Now, I did generally enjoy the focus back onto the documentary aspect with the interviews. That builds the story a bit more. There's more instances of people out there in the high desert, whether they're on the trains or There's a motorcyclist who sees someone hunched over in by the side of the road, who then seems to go off into a cave. Those moments are, I think, a bit better than the second film. They certainly feel slightly creepier. But that being said, it's even more blink and you'll miss it. And I do love in like a found footage film when you have moments of, oh shit, did you see that? But I feel that that's something where if that's what you're going to go for, you have to build on that. And it doesn't really. There's lots of comments of people who worked on the train saying there were these things, I thought they were people, but they don't walk like people, who would just stare at the trains from the hills, and when you sort of flash a light now near them, they'd all disperse. But you know, so weird and terrifying and blah blah blah. But you never really see that. I think one of the creepiest aspects with the first film was you didn't really get anything creepy that you saw till the end. And at the end, you've got these instances of seeing someone with some sort of deformity, but someone just really creepy, meandering about, who then is getting closer and closer to Gary. In the second film, we got some more, it was more kind of point of view of like people filming that the actual people themselves, or whatever they are filming, which is creepy in a sense, but then you're not really getting any potential kind of reveal. And they do focus on some parts near the end of the second film to give a bit more clarity of like there's a really blink and you'll miss it, and they kind of slow it down to show a particular moment. But with this one, the setup and the found footage scenes, I do think, are much better in this. When we're looking at some of Oscar's footage, specifically when we get to the finale, because you're getting these moments of him maneuvering through caves and going into these old abandoned buildings, and you're hearing sounds from above and sounds behind him. And that is great in a found footage for building tension, where it's like, oh, you're in a creepy room, it's all dark and abandoned, and things are broken, then you just hear something behind the character and they turn around, there's nothing there. And you think when they turn back, there's going to be something there, but there isn't anything yet. You know, that sort of thing. That is done very well. I have to give that credit there. But then the very kind of like finale, so I won't say exactly what it is, but there's a moment where he is utilizing something where he realizes whatever is following him doesn't like something that happens. So when he adjusts that accordingly to try and get them to come out, just because he's just getting very terrified, the reveal, I didn't understand. It was very scary in terms of jumpiness, because it's like you can't really see anything, then you can, then you can't see anything, then you can, then you can't see anything, and then when you can, something's right there. But the reveal of what that was, I was just like, I'd had all this kind of built up tension through that kind of finale sequence, and it made me jump, but it also made me think, wait, what the fuck was that? But again, I have to be very vague, because a lot of the kind of highlights of this do come in the final, half an hour of the film. I did then find myself having to roll my eyes a bit, because it does the exact same thing at the end of this film that the second film did. And if you're a huge fan of the series as a whole, great news for you. Hints at a fourth film. I don't know if that's been confirmed, I don't know if that's in production. But it does what the second film did. Not the exact sequence, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was just a moment at the very end of this film where it's like you have another clip with either a bit of audio, whatever it was, making it very clear that there will be a fourth film. And I just found myself going, I like the setup of the first film. I wanted to really enjoy the second and third film, and there's good moments in both, and I do think this is a step up from the second, and the second film wasn't terrible, it just wasn't as good. But it very much, I'm not a fan of just doing this film series for film series' sake. I get it from a filmmaker's perspective. If you're like, hey, I've got a concept, it does pretty well in its market, fairly inexpensive to make, I would assume. Let's see where it can go. And I do believe these are very popular in the kind of the indie horror and found footage horror market. But for me, it just made me go, oh god, okay, I'll watch it, but I'm just not getting hyped when it's like, oh, are we gonna get answers? No, not really, not really. Oh, but there's a hint. There's a hint that we're gonna find something out, and I just think to myself, we're not gonna find out shit. And I don't like to be downbeat, but that's just kind of the feeling it gave me at the end of it. I can't remember what I gave the second film, which is bad because it was only a week ago. But I'm going to give this 5.5 out of 10. Again, it had some good moments. I do feel it's a step up, and maybe I gave the second one a 6, or don't think it was a 6.5, but maybe I gave it a 6. But I just felt Horror in the High Desert Firewatch. It was good. I don't like this idea of just churning them out for the sake of it. When there's an interesting story of a missing outdoorsman, and we're just adding to further things and not really learning much new. I don't know. It falls into that trap of let's just ask more questions but not bother about answers. You want to build up intrigue, sure, but at some point you have to have some element of payoff, and it just how long do you spin that yarn before you run out of yarn? Anyway, we're finally going to go to a featured presentation. I mean, he says we're going to go to a featured presentation, and then the video stalls, and my background has changed. Ah, fuck it, we'll just go for this one. We know what we're talking about now. Not Twin Peaks, Silent Hill. Yeah, we're going to go Silent Hill. We're doing a featured presentation. We've already been doing this like an hour and a half, and I've committed to doing some video gaming. Fuck. We may end up saving the video. I don't know. We'll play a little bit. We'll play a little bit of Silent Hill 3 after the show. So Silent Hill. Silent Hill is let's just scroll all the way up to the top of this massive Wikipedia page. Silent Hill is a horror anthology media franchise centered on a series of survival horror games created by Keiichiro Toyama and published by Konami. The first 4 mainline video games in the series, Silent Hill, Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, and Silent Hill 4 The Room, were developed by an internal group called Team Silent, a development staff within former Konami subsidiary Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo. The later 4 mainline games, Origins, Homecoming, Shattered Memories, and Downpour, were developed by other, mostly Western developers. Silent Hill franchise has expanded to include various print pieces, 2 feature films, and spin-off video games. As of 2013, the game series has sold over 8.4 million copies worldwide. It's set in the series' eponymous fictional American town. The series is heavily influenced by the literary genre of psychological horror, with its player character being mostly everymen. So, I remember the very first Silent Hill when... Oh, we got Erratic Agent in the chat. Hey, dude. Long time, no time. How's it going? Erratic Agent was, well, he's been on the Ministry of Slam a few times back in the day, and was also on one of our very, very early episodes, talking zombies. We did a top 5 zombie film. So Erratic, I know it's very, very long overdue. We probably do need to look at maybe doing another top 5. We'll chat in the Discord. But welcome back to the show, Erratic Agent. Good to hear from you. I never played Silent Hill 4 The Room, so I said like kind of at the very top of the show that we're going to do a little bit of a game stream after show playing a bit of Silent Hill 3, and that's going to be a first time play for me. Silent Hill 1 and 2 I loved to varying extents, but I loved back in the day. But for whatever reason, I dropped off by the time that 3 came around. And 4, I because of not playing 3, I never played 4, never played the later games. But I always remember with the very first Silent Hill that my dear late mother had picked me up a PS1, and it was, I guess I get some of my thriftiness from my mother, because rather than just buying a full price store bought one from Argos at a very expensive premium, she'd used what was called, I guess, I don't know if it's still around, but the Yellow Pages, like a local county, which I guess is the same sort of thing in America as a state, but a local area book that would have various services and free ads, so people could advertise, oh, I've got a car for sale, I've got a lawnmower for sale, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And so someone was selling a PS1, PSX as it was kind of known back in the day. So we went there, very, very cool. It was a cracked PS1, which at the time I had no idea what that meant. But he then went, okay, and here's a bundle of games. So there was like a Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, a few other games. And I realised because it's cracked, what that meant was twofold. One, I could play games from other countries, because previously they'd be region locked. Like you get a game from the shop in the UK, it is PAL region. It's, or I guess now region 2, whatever. But it'd be locked to only working on UK released consoles. If you had a cracked PlayStation, you could get games imported from Japan or America. It would work. The other thing is it would play copied CDs. So that is how this guy was running his little side hustle. You could basically just get a copy of any game at a discount rate. I wouldn't advocate this on air because there are legal issues relating to that, but that is how I first played Silent Hill, because he gave me this copied CD with Silent Hill written on it. The penny ads is what they're called in the States. Yes, it was like the free ads or Yellow Pages or White Pages in the UK. And so that was the first time I played Silent Hill. I think I'd also got a copy of Resident Evil, the first Resident Evil, and then one of the first games that I'd bought, like actual games that I went to the shops to buy, or I got my mum to buy for me, was Resident Evil 2, with the kind of George A. Romero-esque zombie art on the cover. I always remember that. It's so simple and unique, but effective, with the black background with the white. It's kind of almost like a gory zombified version of the Misfits logo, the punk band. I remember picking that up. But anyway, Silent Hill. The main things that stuck out to me was the music was quite kind of radio rock, like contemporary rock music, which I guess was kind of par of the course for like some like kind of Japanese games back in the day. But it always felt quite like at odds with the content of the game, because you get into the game, and as you might be able to see on screen if you're watching this live, it's this is PlayStation 1, so it's very polygonated. There's a real shallow depth of field. So what they would the reason that we had the fog was, one, to kind of set up the mystery of this town, and things are hidden in the fog, or the mist, if you will. But also because those older games would kind of be continuously loading as you're making your way through the map. That's why when you enter a room in Silent Hill or in Resident Evil, you'd have the door animation. That's because it's quickly loading up the next kind of rendering the next area. But instantly with the game, you get this opening cinematic with pretty good sort of cinematic graphics at the time. PlayStation were very good for that. Like kind of similarly with Final Fantasy VII or more so 8, I suppose, when it comes to cinematics. And you get into the game, and even though looking at it now, the polygons are quite lumpy, but it is just a terrifying entry. So, with the first Silent Hill game, released in 1999, the game was released exclusively for PlayStation. It's third-party view with real-time rendering of 3D environments. To mitigate limitations of the console hardware, developers used fog and darkness to muddle the graphics and the pop-ins, which in return helped set up the atmosphere and mystery of the game. So that's very innovative, straight off the bat, to utilize that to basically make the limitations of the software work in your favor and really push it to its limits very early on in the PlayStation's life, I think, as well. Unlike earlier survival horror games that focused on protagonists with combat training, the player character of Silent Hill is an everyman, and I guess that's the other thing that you generally don't really take into consideration when you compare something like Silent Hill to Resident Evil. They're obviously very different games, but they're survival horror games that started at a similar sort of time, so they're naturally going to have that kind of side-by-side comparison. And with the Resident Evil games, you're playing as members of STARS, like a police force, a combat force, so they naturally will be weapon trained and be able to use weapons. But Harry Mason in the first Silent Hill game, he's not going to be comfortable swinging around a tire iron or a crowbar or shooting a gun. So you're almost straight away in that kind of role of, okay, I've just got to defend myself. I'm not like fully trained for this, because they're not. The character isn't. The game follows Harry Mason as he searches for his missing adopted daughter in the eponymous fictional American town of Silent Hill, stumbling upon a cult conducting a ritual to revive a deity it worships. He discovers her true origin, I should say. There are 5 game endings that are possible, depending on actions taken by the player, including a joke ending. The joke endings kind of become a bit of a thing with the Silent Hill games, at least early on. So, I really enjoyed the first Silent Hill game. It's one of the games where I've always just kind of felt like when it got announced that we were getting Silent Hill 2, a lot of people were generally happy until it was kind of announced who the studio was behind it. And again, I still don't really understand what that studio's done to not have it. I don't know anything about the studio, basically. But a lot of people were hyped about it because Silent Hill 2 was a massive game. For me, I've always felt like the story in Silent Hill 1 I just felt was so strong, as such that it was obviously adapted into a film, which we will talk about a bit later on. But I always found that it was so much more engrossing. It had a decent level of difficulty, and back when I was younger, I liked a bit of a challenge. Not so much these days. I like to just play for the story with very little difficulty. Even though I do still occasionally dip into Elden Ring, but that's that's another story. I still wish that had a difficulty setting or God mode or something. I'd thoroughly enjoy that if I didn't die all the time, but that's the point. With this though, I always felt like this would benefit so much more from a remake. Now I do understand that there was a reimagining called Shattered Memories, but I never played that, and that was a game initially for the Wii and ported to PS2 and PSP. But it was ported to the PS2 in 2014, when the PS2 would most likely be like, that just seems a bit weird, because I guess the PS3 would have been out in 2014, with maybe even the PS4. Don't know. Anyway, I always felt that this game was ripe for a remake, even so much when they released the HD collection, which we'll be going into a bit later on. I was just like, okay, 2 and 3. I mean, I've never played 3, but where's 1? Why aren't they doing 1? And I do get it. It's a lot easier engine-wise or whatever to do a HD version of a PS2 game than it is a PS1. Still, just remake it, you cowards. But this game, it followed tank controls, which were the norm back then, which felt normal back then. You try and play that now, it's incredibly difficult. And I just remember being so terrified at times. Like, the opening of the game leads you to a point where you have to die. And that was just felt so different and unique because you're following this, you're looking for your daughter in this fog-filled town. You don't know anything about it when you're walking around it, until you come to this kind of area that was shown on screen a moment ago. That's like an alleyway with blood. And as you follow down that alleyway, the town turns, and you enter the kind of alternate reality. And that's something we haven't really touched on so far with Silent Hill. It's not just this town shrouded in fog, but it's a town that once you enter, you're kind of almost cut off from the outside world until the town will allow you to leave. And at certain points, whether that's time specific or area specific or whatnot, the reality flips. And where you could be walking around a abandoned hospital, fog everywhere, you could turn a corner, and then that whole reality of where you are is just dank chains. It's like going into Hellraiser. And Hellraiser, when you're a kid, is one of the scarier horrors because, like, the artwork was just terrifying for the VHS. Just this man with pins in his head. You know, if you saw something like Hellraiser when you were a kid, it's just like, this is just horrible. You compare it to like a slasher like Halloween, where it's like you're not really seeing too much. There's a lot of like suspense and tension. But then you see, you know, you go from that to then seeing something like Hellraiser, where it's like a lot more grotesque than you would have seen in Halloween or something like that. That's what you're kind of getting with Silent Hill when the reality changes and shifts. It's just nightmare fuel. And that sounds odd when you look at the graphics, but just when you're a kid playing this, it's like, oh god, I haven't got a weapon, and all of a sudden there are these like just absolutely terrifyingly grotesque abominations approaching you, and you've got to try and maneuver around them with barely anything to kind of cover your ass. I never finished Silent Hill back in the day. I can't remember where I'd gotten to, but I'd gotten a bit stuck. It followed a similar template to Resident Evil in terms of survival horror with puzzles, and I think with that, it also included a lot of backtracking. I can't remember what the inventory system was like in Silent Hill 1, or the Silent Hill games in general. Obviously, with Resident Evil, you've got limited space that you have to manage the space and store things in storage, conserve your saves, etc., etc. I can't remember what the setup was like for saves or inventory in Silent Hill. I'm sure we'll find out when we get on Silent Hill 3 a bit later on to play. But I'm sure I'd gotten to a part where I was checking like a guidebook or a magazine, or maybe I used my like half an hour of dial-up internet time to look at an online walkthrough. And I got into a point where I was just like, oh god, it was either an area where I kept dying or it was an area where I had to do a lot of backtracking. And that backtracking is the reason I stopped playing Code Veronica, just because I'd done so much going through an area. Then it's like, oh, to get through this next section, you need the moon-shaped crest. And I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, that is like an hour. Well, probably not an hour. That's a dramatic. That's an overtly dramatic response, but there's a lot of backtracking I've got to do just to get that point, and I just thought I can't be arsed, so I didn't. I think that's a similar thing that happened with Silent Hill 1, but yeah, the combat was very much of the time, you know, point and you can aim up or aim down, but you know, these aren't the games where you can like run and gun. It's very much a mixture of run and hide if you can, or hope that you have enough ammunition or the relevant weapons to take on these just terrifying monsters. And also, you've got these multiple different endings. Like, I think a real kind of standout thing with Silent Hill just was the story. It was just like reading a mixture of like a Stephen King and with elements of a H.P. Lovecraft novel. Um, there was just this really intricate cult storyline, and the certain actions that you've done throughout the game will dictate which characters are available later on, and help you out or hinder you, whether you get a good or a bad or whatever ending, or the joke ending. So it sucked that I never got that far. But when it comes to these games with the multiple endings, I very much have always taken the approach of, well, I'll play it how I would play it, unless there's particular things that people say you have to try and do this. I'll play the game how I would play it, and I'll get whatever ending I get. I'm not someone that replays games, so I'm not someone that would ever jump back into. If I'd finished Silent Hill 1 back in the day, it's highly unlikely I would have gone, right, I'm going to replay this now to get a different ending. Because I'm such a narrative-focused gamer that once I know the main story or the bulk of the story, it just doesn't interest me to go through the beats again. That's why I don't play games on multiple different difficulty settings. It's just not for me. I know a friend of mine many years ago once said, well, you haven't completed the game then if you haven't done all the difficulties. And it was just like, I complete the story. The story is what I care about. Or if it's like a sport game, then there isn't a story. It's just fun. But I wouldn't have ever seen these other endings. You know, I think probably at some point over the years I might have looked on YouTube and seen videos for the different endings, but it's not something I would have just ended up doing. But more power to people that do that and are completionists, you know, to try and get all those, and, you know, get platinums as the modern equivalent. Following on from Silent Hill, which, yeah, as I say, came out in 1999. In North America, it came out in February. Japan was March, and Europe, we had to wait till July. Doesn't seem very fair. Following on from that, 2 years later, came Silent Hill 2, which is what many consider to be the best game in the franchise. 2001 survival horror game developed by Team Silent. The game was released from September to November, originally for the PlayStation 2. The second installment in the series, it centers on James Sunderland, a widower who journeys to the town of Silent Hill after receiving a letter from his dead wife. An extended version, containing a bonus scenario born from a wish and other additions, was published for Xbox in December of the same year. 2002, it was ported to Microsoft Windows and re-released from the PlayStation 2 as a greatest hits version, which includes all bonus content from the Xbox port. A remastered high-definition version was released for the PS3 and Xbox 360 in 2012 as part of the Silent Hill HD collection. It began production or development in June 1919, soon after Silent Hill had been completed. Its narrative was inspired by the Russian novel Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and some of the influences of the game's artistic style include the work of films directors David Lynch and Adrian Lyne, specifically Jacob's Ladder. Now, that does make sense. I guess there are Lynchian elements in the first film, but definitely more so in the second film. And Jacob's Ladder, with certain characters and their movements, is very reminiscent of Jacob's Ladder. So the Silent Hill 2 focuses directly on the psychology of its characters. I guess that is a key point in this game. I mean, the graphics are a big step up from PS1 to PS2. That is, you know, it looked incredible in the day. And you look at some of these images now, and, you know, they don't look bad. I mean, obviously, they don't really compare to, you know, your modern PS5 and Xbox Series X graphics, but for the time, they really, really stood out as just such a huge jump up from the first game. You still had all the fog, but you had a bit more depth of field. You could see a lot more details of the buildings, and you know, as it's shown on screen, spray painted or written in blood, probably more like written in blood messages on the wall. To kind of give little hints of what's going on. I guess the reason, I mean, the story in this is very good. I don't think it's as good as the first game. And there's a lot more elements of mature themes with certain characters. There's a lot more talk of suicide in this game in terms of some characters' actions and some characters' reasonings, or what's led them to Silent Hill. Because James does interact with a number of people who have also come and ended up in Silent Hill, whereas in the first game, quite a lot of the people that you're interacting with were residents. Not all of them. It does feel like you're kind of crossing paths here with more characters who have also, for whatever reasons, ended up in Silent Hill. And Silent Hill is kind of almost, in this game, a little bit more of a purgatory, a kind of a stopping place on the way to maybe hell, or it's a personal hell for some of the characters. It does feel like that's a bit more front and center in this game. I think for me, I'm assuming that these games must have had difficulty settings, like in terms of an easy mode, because I'm pretty sure with Resident Evil, from memory, you have normal or hard. There isn't really an easy mode, or there wasn't on the early games from memory. But the thing that I found with this game was it didn't seem to be that long. And games back in the day weren't the length of modern games. Like, back in the early 2000s, a single player game would generally be between like 6 and 10, maybe at push 12 hours. Whether that probably came down to also the limitations of the storage, like, you know, a Final Fantasy game would be 4 discs long, but that would also be like a 30-hour game. Majority of mainstream games, single-player games, would be 1 disc, and with that, you've then got the limitation of storage. So more often than not, you'd be playing like a 6 to maybe 10-hour game. But I felt that I completed this within a week, and that's sort of playing it after school. Just looking at the chat, Eddie's off to sleep. Have a good night rest, mate. Thanks for coming along to the stream. I did find that I just completed the game quite quickly. And back in those days when I'm using my pocket money or whatnot to get a game, I want to get bang for my buck. And it did feel like I got through it quite easily. Which again, for me, I guess it's the balancing act of if it's a good story, I'm focusing on the story. And that's why I like the games like Life is Strange, where the whole focus is on the story. I guess the balancing act is if it's a game where the story is there's a story, but it's more focused on the action, then it isn't that fun if you're just blitzing through everyone with no peril. I get that. I just found with this game, even with the moments with Pyramid Head, who was was introduced and became instantly iconic in Silent Hill 2, I just found myself being a bit like, yeah, it's good. Is that it? I don't know. I will probably play it because I've now got the HD collection of 2 and 3. But there was just something about it where I thought, for all of its appearance looking better and the story being quite different, but not in a bad way, I just remember finishing the game and being a bit like numb, and that's not what I want from a survival horror game. And I guess it probably comes down also to which ending I got. Maybe that influenced my feelings on how it ended. I just found that once it reached its the culmination of events, that I was like, okay, fine, I guess that's it. And that's possibly why also I've always kind of felt like the first game is the best and is the one that needs to have a modern remake. Whilst this game did introduce quite a lot of the more iconic characters along the way. Now, as mentioned for the video games, The series did continue. Had a third game that was rather successful, I believe. The fourth game I've always heard mixed things about. I wasn't aware that the original studio worked on the first 4 games. I always assumed that by the point of the fourth game, I should say, that's when the studios had changed. But no. It's at this point that I kind of felt like I dropped off the Silent Hill games. I didn't really keep up to date with what else was going on. But 5 years later, we had the first film release. I think I've got potentially a treat at the door. You're gonna have to come in a bit because I can't reach. Thank you. I've been gifted some iced cream. Thank you very much to my lovely fiance. We had the first film, Silent Hill. I think due to how long this show's going, we're probably not going to game tonight. I think we'll schedule a Silent Hill 3 game in the very near future. Fran in the chat, do you count PT as being part of the series? I do. I never got to play PT because I didn't have a PS3 at the time that it came out, and by the time I got a PS3, it had been taken off the store. That being said, I have seen all the game, all the playthroughs, and just that cinematic video where it was revealed it was going to be Silent Hills. I just thought, okay, yes, Guillermo del Toro, whoever else is involved, which I'm just blanking on the name. Kojima, was it Kojima? Not sure. Very, very excited, and obviously we didn't get that, which is a massive, massive shame. Yeah, I think it was Kojima. Norman Reedus, there we go. I do consider that canon. We ended up getting in 2006 the supernatural horror film Silent Hill, directed by Christopher Gans, written by Roger Avery, based on. It's kind of based on the first game, but then it also has characters from the second game, such as not Pinhead, fucking hell, talking too long, Pyramid Head, and the the nurse zombie type things. The plot follows Rose de Silva, who, and I think Harry is played by Sean Bean as like a secondary character. Rose de Silva, who takes her adopted daughter Sharon to the town of Silent Hill, for which Sharon cries while sleepwalking. Rose is involved in a car accident near the town and awakens to find Sharon missing. While searching for her daughter, she fights a local cult and begins to uncover Sharon's connection to the town's dark past. After attempting to gain the film rights to Silent Hill for 5 years, Gans sent a video interview to Konami explaining his plans for adapting it and how important the games were to him. Konami awarded him the film rights as a result, and he and Avery began work on the script in 2004. I've generally enjoyed the first film. I think I watch it for what it is as opposed to how it connects or what it takes or changes from the game series, because it is, at this point, video game adaptations weren't how they are now, where there's a bit more faith. This was quite a shot in the dark, and I felt it did enough of its own stuff whilst also honouring enough of the source material to not kind of, bastardize it. I did enjoy that. I think it's quite creepy. There's a moment shown on screen where Pyramid Head appears and skins a woman with his hands in one fell swoop. The first time seeing that, I think I might have seen it in the cinema. I don't know, I might have been a bit young. Was terrifying. And the moment when the police officer, not Dahlia, Sybil, is basically getting roasted over a fire, that was pretty darn nasty. She basically gets boiled. But this film had a great cast. Radha Mitchell, Sean Bean, Laurie Holden, Deborah Kara-Unger, Kim Coates. I forgot Kim Coates was in this. Tanya Allen and Alice Krieg. It's a pretty darn good cast. I do enjoy it. And I enjoyed it so much that when I heard there was a sequel coming out, I was like, okay, slap it in my veins. Silent Hill Revelation. I then watched the film and it's a massive drop off in quality. Now, I could put onto one side that this is kind of adapting the third game, in the series, working as a sequel to Silent Hill, but adapting the events of the third game. And I was, not familiar with the story of Silent Hill 3. But it's a 2012 film written and directed by MJ Bassett based on the film series Silent Hill. The film is a sequel to Silent Hill 2006, stars Adelaine Clemens, Kit Harington, Martin Donovan, Malcolm McDowell, and Carrie Ann Moss, with Deborah Kara Unger, Sean Bean, and Radha Mitchell returning from the previous film. The plot follows Heather Mason, who discovers on the eve of her 18th birthday that her presumed identity is false and is drawn to the town of Silent Hill. So, this is a film that came out around the boom of 3D films, and 3D films were generally not great. There was a few standouts like Avatar, but for the most case, it was basically just terrible layered on 3D. Didn't look great. The plot for this it had that kind of feel of watching like a TV film where, I don't know what it is with the lighting, but everything is far too well lit. You can see far too much detail in every shot. And for Silent Hill especially, or just horror, you want to have shadows, you want to have darkness, you want to have, corner of the eye phenomenon. You don't want to see every clear detail of everything going on, because then there's nothing to kind of build up to. The build up, all this was everything was overtly well lit, and then occasionally things flew out at the screen. Silent Hill Revelation was such a drop off in quality when it comes to the films. Now, there is a reboot. There is a reboot with Christopher Gans returning. Called Return to Silent Hill. It's the third installment in the series, but it is adapting Silent Hill 2, following the story of James being separated from his soulmate and receiving a letter that leads him back to the town called Silent Hill, where he hopes to find her. Starring Jeremy Irvine. I don't know who that is. And Hannah Emily Anderson. No, it's in Jigsaw. Don't know which one. So, the future cinematically sounds quite interesting, and obviously with the video games, we are getting Silent Hill 2 remake. There was recently, what's it called, The Message? There was like a demo free game on PlayStation Store called Silent Hill, The Message. That was okay. I mean, it was free, so you can't really critique it, but it was like, the graphics were decent. But it was a bit of a cash grab. Not a cash grab, but it was a bit just of a nothing game. Looked good, had a couple of jumpy moments, but story wasn't much. It's a series where it's been hampered by a number of middling efforts from the sounds of it. These aren't games I've played, I can't be super critical of them, but from the sounds of it, it feels like once the series got shifted to Western developers, they didn't necessarily understand what the focus was of either the storytelling or how to set up that world and develop the scares around it. So with that in mind, that just kind of led to middling and at various stages piss poor returns, which is very unfortunate. But that does lead us to the end of this show. Now, the original plan was do the show, go straight into a game stream of Silent Hill 3. It's getting late, and I didn't anticipate doing one of my longer shows for the first time in a while. So I'm going to withhold, or save, I should say, the video game stream, but not for long. That's either going to be this weekend, I mean, we have got SummerSlam, or early next week I will do an hour or so of game streaming. But I hadn't anticipated spending about an hour of preamble and news. An hour and probably 20 of news. So we're going to call it for the evening. I'm going to stay online for just a little bit. I've got my ice cream to eat and also just talk a bit of wrestling. But thank you very much if you're watching this live, or if you're listening to this later on podcast platforms, or watching this on YouTube. Be sure to hit up the X account, which is ministry_horror. Follow the channel, interact, and just talk horror, and I'll talk about it on the show. There's the Discord, which is the Wrestling Arena Discord account. There's a sub channel there for the Ministry of Horror. Check out, that's where we sort of chat throughout the week. Instagram is at Tez Elliott, TEZZELLIOTT. If you want to follow my Instagram, which is normally just pictures of dogs or gym stuff, occasionally horror bits here and there. But thank you very much. I'm going to end the show now. I will catch you later.